Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Retro Wrestling with Gene Jackson. And man, we've got a special episode for you this time around. I've been excited about this one. Everybody knows what a fan I am of Memphis wrestling and the Tennessee territory. And I thought it was really cool when I heard several months ago, or I guess nearly a year ago, when it was announced the NWA was bringing back the Mid America title. Now, I know some people aren't necessarily familiar with that title, but I remembered it well. And it's, in fact, when I was at one of the NWA Legends conventions and came across Dave Milliken's table, and he had all these different belts on the table that you could grab up and take pictures with. The first belt I grabbed off the table, like, Rosie, take my picture, was the NWA Mid America title. And Rosie's like, really? That one? That's like not the greatest looking belt over there. I'm like, no, but it's just like, it's really cool and it's got a really cool history. And so when they brought the title back and they crowned the first champion, and the first champion was a guy that I have such great respect and admiration for. Man, he's such a talented guy. I had the pleasure of booking him for Twin States Wrestling during the short period of time that I had a brain fart and thought I wanted to be a wrestling promoter. Quickly thought better of it, but he's one of the guys that I'm proud to say that I booked on a show. But let's welcome right now the current reigning and defending NWA Mid America champion, Jeremiah Plunkett. Jeremiah, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Oh man, I turned blur on, so you really can't see it well. But I had set up Miss. You know what? I shouldn't have turned that on. My bad. But I've got Miss Christine with me, Teeny for short. She's gonna be sitting here by us while we do the podcast. I guess since it's on blur, I will sit her out of camera range.
Well, I'm gonna put this up on the screen right here. So there's an up close look at the current NWA Mid America Heavyweight title, and there you see the different states that it covers, and Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee. And so, I know that you're from Tennessee. Obviously, you've wrestled there for quite a few years. How excited were you being on the NWA roster when you heard that the Mid America title was making a comeback?
When I saw the Mid America title was making a comeback, I was a little bit shocked. I didn't know how much they went back in Tennessee history. I know I had pitched at one point when we were doing the Crockett Cup in Nashville. I had sent them a picture of, remember the old background of the gladiator guy holding up the belt and all that, and the yellow and stripes. I had pitched, and it got totally no-sold, but I had pitched recreating that set because when we went to St. Louis, we recreated like the 70s NWA set. So I pitched recreating that set, and even to the point of having Joe, and I guess it would have been Tim Storm at the time, like get the old Baxter suits and maybe even do an episode in a wig, so do the old Dave Brown and Lance Russell, but when it got no sold, I'm like, maybe they don't care about Tennessee wrestling. And then I saw the Mid America Heavyweight Championship being announced. So I'm like, well, that was a bit of a surprise, but I was very, very, very excited because, like you, I am a massive, massive fan of Memphis wrestling. It's what I grew up on.
Absolutely. And when I heard they were bringing it back, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm sure it's going to be one of these fancy Dan recent title belts, some big gaudy, something that represents, what we see nowadays most of the time when new titles are trotted out there. But man, to their credit, they recreated the original to just about as close as you possibly could. I know a mutual friend of ours who knows a thing or two about belts may have a tiny gripe or two about it, but I mean, you can't get a whole lot closer than this, man. I mean, that's the belt I remember. That's the one I remember seeing on TV, and I remember seeing around the waist of Dutch Mantel and this man right here, Superstar Bill Dundee. And then there's a shot of the great Bobby Eaton
Yes,
holding
sir.
the Mid America and the international title
Oh,
there.
the old international title, yeah.
Yeah. So, man, so to share a lineage with guys like that has got to make you proud. And so, I've been aiming to do for a while now. We've had so much going on, and finally, I hauled off and I sent you a message like, Plunkett, dude, I want to have you on the show, and I want to talk about the history and the lineage of the Mid America title. And I was really excited when you were receptive to it and seemed excited to do it. So that's what we're going to do on this episode, man. We're gonna. It's been around a long time. We can't talk about every title change. Obviously, this would be a 4-hour event, but let's start out. This belt started in 1957. In April 1957, the very first Mid America champion was crowned. And folks, I don't know if you realize this, but the first man to hold that championship that Jeremiah Plunkett holds right now is the great Nature Boy Buddy Rogers in April of 57. How humbling is that, man, to have a championship right there next to you in that room right now that has a lineage back to Buddy Rogers? I mean, that's
so I didn't know that. And I don't think a lot of people did. I know a lot of the Goulis records are kind of fuzzy. Granted, Memphis didn't keep great records either. The Jarrett side didn't. But I know a lot of the Goulis records are kind of fuzzy and out there. So when I learned that it was Buddy Rogers, I thought it was the tournament in Buenos Aires, Argentina thing. But I did some asking, and apparently he was in the territory around that time. So it seems to be legitimate.
Yes, he absolutely was. And we're going to talk a little bit about some times where maybe the title history gets a little disjointed for various reasons. But from Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, the first, some of the earliest champions would include Tony Charles, Don Kent, Luke Graham, Bob Armstrong held it multiple times, Dick Steinborn, Phil Hickerson, Tommy Gilbert, the fabulous Jackie Fargo.
Yeah, baby.
And one that we talked about before we started recording that surprised both of us, the late, great Harley Race held the Mid America title. Man, just listening, I mean, we got a lot more names to go as we go on, but man, just hearing that list of names has got to kind of blow you away.
Very much so. And some of those guys I've had the pleasure of meeting. Tommy Gilbert, I had a really fun conversation. Actually, I see Doug Gilbert behind you. Doug was running one of his fair shows, and it was before Tommy had passed. And man, I don't know if I talked to anybody else on that card as long as I talked to Tommy. I probably talked to Tommy 2-3 hours, just laughing, him telling me stories. Tommy was such a character. And so Tommy Gilbert, very like, I don't want to say underrated. I just think he was at a time when not as many people saw him. He's a very good wrestler. I watched a match, the Eddie Gilbert Memorial Show in Rottenran, and it was Tommy Gilbert and Dory Funk Jr. in like the late 90s.
Yeah.
And they tore it up and were beating the crap out of each other.
Right.
But I have a ton of respect for Tommy Gilbert. But yeah, Harley Race, man. Harley Race is on my Mount Rushmore. To the fact that I have a robe sitting in the closet that is a very heavily inspired Harley Race robe that I don't get to wear quite as much as I wish I would. But to be on you listed Buddy Rogers, to be on a lineage that has both Buddy Rogers and Harley Race is insane.
Yeah, I mean, because when you talk about the great world champions of wrestling, Mid America world title, I mean, any title, Harley Race is one of the greatest champions of all time. I'll debate that with anybody. I mean, say what you will about Ric Flair. Ric Flair was a great champion, but Harley to me was, one of the last like road warrior territory guys. Man, when you listen to his schedule, the amount of matches that man worked year in and year out, going around defending that title, 60-minute matches just night after night, and sometimes multiple. Like there were days he had more than one 60-minute match in a day, which is just insane. That's pretty awesome, man. Harley Race, like I say, and then Buddy Rogers as well. The original Nature Boy, and that's another name we hadn't really touched on yet. But man, if we're going to talk about being fans of the Memphis territory, there's no bigger star amongst the Memphis territory than the fabulous Jackie Fargo.
No, not at all.
So
not until Jerry Lawler came along was there anybody close.
That's right. I mean, that man drew so much money throughout the territory. It's crazy.
I was listening to something today, actually. Jackie Fargo working for Nick Goulas, and that'll make this so crazy. Jackie Fargo in 1 year made over $100,000 working for Nick Goulas.
Wow.
Not too many people can say that.
So when you consider A, Nick Goulas, B, the time that would have been, that's super impressive. And to circle back to you mentioned Tommy Gilbert. I think he's a guy that doesn't get enough praise. I know I've talked to Doug on our podcast, and Doug has mentioned many times that when Lou Thez would come to Memphis, a lot of guys were intimidated and didn't want to wrestle him, and they were always like, oh, let's put Tommy in there. And Tommy Gilbert could always hang with a guy like Lou Thez. I mean, that speaks for itself. You know what I mean? Like, so anytime anybody gives a Tommy Gilbert his flowers is always cool with me. And another name that was among that list, who's a guy that I think the younger generation don't necessarily know or appreciate, Phil Hickerson.
Oh, yeah, baby. From Jackson, Tennessee. I love Phil Hickerson.
So entertaining. Just really good in the ring.
He could talk. He could go. And even P.Y. Chuhai.
Yes. I mean, on the tail end of his career, he found a way to still go out there, be entertaining, but believable. I mean, that's what's crazy. Like, that's such a silly gimmick. And if you try to describe somebody like, all right, it's Phil Hickerson, but he's doing this Japanese gimmick, P.Y. Chuhai, and people roll their eyes like, what are you talking about? But then when you actually watched him in the ring, it was entertaining. Plus, just seeing him out there with him and Tojo together. The only thing better than that was seeing Tojo in the cowboy hat when he was part of the Tennessee, Texas angle.
Yes,
taught me every single time him and Embry and Pritchard come to that curtain, I seen Tojo in the cowboy hat. Just made me smile. So,
and Phil Hickerson, like, looking at him, I mean, he looked like a guy who could fight. Like, don't get me wrong, but he didn't look like a guy who could do everything Phil could do.
No, he just looked like a roughhouser, like a dude. Like, all right, that dude would fight you in a bar, but he's not athletic. But oh my gosh, man, he could do it all in the ring. And I was talking an interview that's about to come out later tonight. Well, as we're recording this in real time, it will already be out by the time this comes out. A lot of time when people hear the name Dennis Condrey, they always think Bobby Eaton, Midnight Express, and yes, they were great. But fans in the 70s, you say Dennis Condrey, they think Dennis Condrey, Phil Hickerson. What a tag team they were.
Heat magnets.
Yes, absolutely. Caused a lot of riots back in their day. But we'll keep it moving here so we can get through the history without, like I say, I don't want people to be here for 2 hours. But so this is where the title history I mentioned starts to get a little disjointed. So October 3rd, 1976, Roger Kirby defeated Bob Armstrong in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And then that title change was replicated the next day in Birmingham, Alabama as well. However, Armstrong was still recognized as champion in Nashville because separate territories, they were recognizing the title in two different areas of the territory somehow. I like to say back in these days, you could do that because, I mean, the people in Birmingham didn't know what was going on necessarily in, Nashville or Chattanooga. So, so Bob loses the title to Roger Kirby in two different towns, but then he goes and defends it against Jerry Lawler on October 6th and loses it to Lawler. So Kirby's recognized as Mid-America champion everywhere except on the Memphis end. Lawler is recognized as champion, but then they merge it into the Southern heavyweight title and they just don't mention it in Memphis. So basically what happens is they do away with it on the Memphis end. And so he drops it to Lawler, and Lawler just kind of, and you're going to see this as we go through the lineage. This happens with Lawler like numerous times. So Roger Kirby's still Mid-America champion in Chattanooga, Birmingham, but down in Nashville and Memphis, Lawler has it, and then it kind of goes away.
Yeah, and the territory at that time, if my memory serves, it wasn't so when Jerry had it, it was the Memphis territory, and then they bicycled the tape.
Mm-hmm.
But from everything I've heard and everything I've read, Duelist had multiple TVs. He had a TV in Nashville, he had a TV in Chattanooga, probably in Birmingham too. I know they could do multiple TV tapings, and I had heard stories of like Fargo getting hard weight on one TV, driving to the other TV for them to bust the hard way back open and using it again.
Exactly.
And stuff like that. So they had multiple TVs, so I could see where it would be easier to do something like that then, as opposed to where you're just bicycling one TV around. But God, right. Keeping up with multiple TVs too would be.
Yeah, I'm guessing Jerry Jarrett was the one who said, "I'm like, what are we doing? Like, why are we not just sending this tape around? Why the hell are we taping three different? We're in the same territory. It's the same promoter, and we're doing three different TVs, and we got different title lineages happening. Like, let's streamline this thing." So kudos to me. The bicycling the tapes was hard enough to keep up with as it was, but good Lord, trying to keep up with 2 or 3 different TVs going on and different matches in the different areas of the same territory had to be quite the headache. So Roger Kirby would lose the title to Tommy Rich on October 11th, 1976 in Birmingham. And so the title would make its way around a few different people, and then it would be vacated in October 1977 and would go on to be won by Lanny Poffo in a 14-man one-night tournament in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, from there, some of the champions that would go on to hold the title after Lanny had it: Dirty Dutch Mantell, Bobby Eaton, Randy Savage, Terry Gordy, Chris Colt, Dennis Condrey, who we mentioned earlier, Tojo Yamamoto, Roger Mason, who was Roger Smith, a.k.a. nearly
Dirty
every
Road.
mask gimmick you can ever name, Dirty Roads and Fire and Assassins and Interns. And I always tell people, like, look, if you're ever in a trivia situation and you get asked who was under a mask, if you go with Roger Smith and Don Bass, you're going to be correct at least 70% of the time. So just roll with that.
Especially if it's in the Memphis territory, 100%.
Absolutely. Rocky Johnson was champion. The great Togo, who would actually end up being Mr. Pogo over time, and Robert Gibson all held the title during that stretch of time. So let's kind of analyze that group there. You're talking, Randy Savage, Dutch Mantell, Bobby Eaton, Terry Gordy, Dennis Condrey, Tojo, Rocky Johnson. So tell me your thoughts on some of those names there that you're sharing a lineage with.
So Dutch is obviously probably the most recognized and prolific Mid-America champion. I think he held it more than anybody, if I remember right.
14 or 15 times. I can't remember which.
Yeah.
I want to say, I know 14 for sure. May have been 15.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, if you Google Mid-America title, most of the pictures you find are going to be of Dutch holding it. Dutch actually took photos with it. There's very few photos. Because later on we'll get to it. I know I'm jumping the gun, but like Tracy Smothers held it. And Tracy Smothers is very important to me. And I went to find a picture of Tracy Smothers with a belt. It's darn near impossible.
Yeah.
Now, our mutual friend sent me one. So,
cool.
of course, if anybody's going to have pictures, it's going to be him. But Bobby Eaton, obviously one of the greatest of all time, and somebody I got to spend a little time getting to know, and he was such a sweetheart. Don't know much about Mr. Pogo beyond his deathmatch stuff.
Right.
So let's see who else. Oh, Terry Gordy. Terry would have had to be 18, 19 at this time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
this would have been very super.
Chris Colt, who
a
lot of people didn't know until that Dark Side of the Ring came out a year or so ago, and that was very enlightening for a lot of people. He was kind of before my time, but I remember him turning up in Continental when I was watching it as a kid as Chris Von Colt. He was doing this German biker character, feuded briefly with Wildcat Wendell Cooley, and Yeah, I was very shocked to hear his history later on as I got to study in the business more. He was, man, what a character he was.
Yeah, I'd never heard of Chris Colt until listening to the Jim Cornette Experience one time. They would talk about him a lot. So when that Dark Side came out, I was almost frothing at the mouth. I was like, I need to know more about this guy. There's not much footage. More is coming out, but there's not much footage on Chris Colt. And apparently one of the best in ring way before his time.
Yeah, that's the thing is I had always just heard a lot of the odd things that he had did, but then the farther you dig deeper into it, they were like, no, he was a tremendous worker. He was just had this wild side to him. But it's funny because like I like a lot of the casual people I know is like, oh, I don't give a crap about that Dark Side this week. It's about some dude I never heard of. But then you got guys like me and you are like, all right, finally something I can learn. Like, there's a lot of them stories, man. I understand why they're doing it because you got to appeal to a broad audience. But a lot of the stories, like, man, we've been hearing that stuff for years. Like, how many more times can we hear about the Montreal screw job? I mean, like, seriously. But the stories like, Chris Colt and digging into like Matt Bourne and stuff like that, like that's the ones where I'm like, all right, we're watching this tonight. This is going to be a good one. So, and then another name there was Rocky Johnson. I didn't realize he had been Mid-America champion at some point. So that was interesting.
Yeah, and what years would this have been?
This would have been in from 77 to 80.
Okay, so this would have been this would have been post Goulas split, correct?
Yes, this would carry us past the Goulas split.
But this is on the Goulas side still, if I'm thinking right.
Yeah, that's on. It's on the
Goulas side for another few years.
Yes,
after the split.
Because it's actually a lot of those champions we just listed is during the Goulas era, because the next point we're getting to, the Mid-America title went inactive in October 1980 when Jarrett completely split from Nick Goulas, and it would be inactive for nearly a year before Jerry reinstated it in July of 1981 and just awarded the title to Ron Bass. And that's when they brought the title back into the Jarrett territory. And from that point, now here's a list. This is going to take us from 81 to around the end of 83. We're talking Steve Kern, Bugsy McGraw, more Dutch Mantell, obviously, the Dream Machine, Troy Graham.
Yeah, baby.
Bobby Eaton, King Cobra, Superstar Bill Dundee, Jesse Barr, Jacques Rougeau, not yet the Mountie, Sweet Brown Sugar, Coco Ware, Stagger Lee, Coco Ware, Terry Taylor, and one of my favorites, Buddy Landale. Some of the guys that carried the title up until the end of 83. I seen you light up at the mention of a few of those guys. Let's hear your thoughts on some of those gentlemen.
Well, obviously, Buddy Landale is awesome. One of Tennessee's best exports. Buddy was so good. He was one of those that if he didn't have the demons that he had, he would have done so much more. Buddy's work in Smoky Mountain was tremendous. Buddy's work here was tremendous as well, but he kind of brought himself back in Smoky Mountain. He had made himself viable again, only to blow out his knee as soon as he got his biggest opportunity ever, which is awful. But that's timing. You had mentioned Tommy Rich, Wildfire Tommy Rich. No more classic character in pro wrestling than Wildfire Tommy Rich. Let's see, the multiple masked incarnations of Coco Ware. I'm assuming during one of those runs is when he nearly killed that guy. No, he was unmasked when he about murdered that jobber on TV.
That kind of stuff was going for a while. Right now on the regional wrestling podcast over on WrestleCopia, me and Ray Russell's covering 85, and he's one of the PYTs with Norvell Austin. Yeah, he's just killing people with that brainbuster, man. I mean, just dropping them right on their head. I mean, it's so scary to watch. But people who only know Coco as the Birdman from his WWF run really have no idea what Coco was capable of. If you look back on him in this era, up through his Memphis time and even his time with Bill Watts in the UWF, Uh, Coco was a really, really talented guy. He was really, really great as a heel. He was great as a baby face. He's always over as a baby face, but man, he was vicious as a heel. Like if somebody who only saw him as fun loving, hey, bird, 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 bird singing and all that, and you go back and show them a video of this era where he's just beating enhancement guys within an inch of their life in the studio on TV. It's alarming, man. It really is.
And those Memphis enhancement guys were pretty well known not to all be the best.
That's a very diplomatic way to put
it. So I've heard rumor, and I don't know if any of this is true, but I've heard rumor that at times there were literally guys who just played softball with Lawler.
Oh, yeah.
And they threw him under a mask. Could you imagine, like, you're just Lawler's buddy under a mask and the Coco Ware beats you to death?
I know. I always picture that. I don't know if you've ever seen that old Weird Al movie, UHF, but that scene where he looks over at Michael Richards and is like, "You want your own TV show? Okay." I just picture Lawler and him going back there, and there's just some dude standing in the dressing room. He's just there hanging out, like say he's Lawler's friend or something. Like, "Hey man, you want to have a match today?" "Yeah, man, cool." And then fast forward to 2 minutes later, Coco is beating them with an inch of their life. It's like, one and done, I'm sure.
One of the few legitimate legends I've worked with that I've ever said no to. He had worked with Josephus the week before he worked with me and gave Josephus the brain buster.
Okay.
And Joe said it nearly killed him, and I worked with him. And he goes, "So what do you want to do?" And I go, "Not take the brain buster." He looked at me wide-eyed. He goes, "All right."
Me and Doug had, of course, we've made Tommy a permanent fixture of the Dangerous Conversations shows now. He's going to be on every week now. But last week we did an episode on the new Fabulous Ones. And I asked him, I was like, "Man, you guys worked with the PYTs and, they were just killing these enhancement guys on TV and just nearly breaking people's necks with that brain buster. Like, how were they to work with?" And Tommy's like, "Well, he didn't give us no brain busters, so we was all right." I was like, I just imagine Coco calling the brain buster on Eddie Gilbert or Tommy Rich in '84. Like, no, we're not doing that,
pal. Like, I love Tommy. I could talk to Tommy forever. He's so funny.
Man, I've gotten to talk to him more in the last month than I ever had in my life. We got to hang out at the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame. I
I'm so jealous
with him and Doug all afternoon. And just watching him interact with the fans and getting to talk to him and just pick his brain, man, it's been really fun. Like he remembers this stuff so well, and he's got so many great stories. He's going to be a great addition to the show. Doug's been great because he's got his stories and Eddie's stories and Tommy's stories, and then now you got Tommy Rich in the mix. So we've got years of stories in the can now. So it's pretty cool. Now one of the guys that you seem to really like I say, you kind of lit up when I said his name, Dream Machine Troy Graham. Did you get a chance to be around Troy at all?
I never met him, not one time. Quentin Charisma turned me on to Memphis Wrestling and turned me on to Dream Machine Troy Graham. And at first I thought it was stupid. He had showed me the advertisement where they're like alluding that it's Dusty when Dream Machine's coming in.
Yeah.
And then he comes in, and I guess Dusty was thinner at this time. But like looking at him, like, who believed this is Dusty beyond the talk? But just the stuff he could do, and the weird, he would go up like for the flare bump, like in the corner,
yeah,
and then just like belly flop out. He took like these amazing athletic bumps. His rap was awesome. He nearly killed Lance Russell once. I loved everything about Dream Machine. There was a time when I had the idea of having a masked character. Just, one of those times where you get bored wrestling and you're like, I want to do something different. I'm like, I'm going to do a masked wrestler. I wonder if I could reach out to somebody who related to Troy and see if they'd be all right with me doing Dream Machine. And I never found anybody, so I never did it. But no, I love Dream Machine, man. He was amazing.
And so I got into the business around 97, and around 1999, Dream started coming to shows with Don Bass. And bless his heart, he was in rough shape at the time, man. He he was bad, messed up on some things, and so it was
Was
like it
this
was
when
cool.
he had come back and did a little run with Lawler? Was this before
Oh
that?
yeah, this was
After
about
that?
5 years after that. He showed back up in
Okay.
'94. He had that
Okay.
run, and then
When he had
that
that little
run ended.
ponytail thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, I didn't recognize him from when I saw him on TV in '94 to when he come in the building walking behind Don Bass. Like, who is that guy? He looks like he's fresh out of prison, which turned out he was. And it was Dream, and he, like I say, he was in rough shape, but he had some matches, but he would hang out in the dressing room, and I mean, I'd sit and talk to him, and he would tell stories, and he was you'd see him one week, and he'd be kind of with it, and the next week, he would be in another world. But hey, I got to hang out and talk to Dream Machine Troy Graham, which was something off the old checklist for me, and not a lot of people got a chance to do it because, like I say, that '85 we're covering right now. In '84, actually in that feud when he and Pork Chop Cash were the new Fabulous Ones against Tommy Rich and Eddie Gilbert, in like the second match of what was going to be this big month-long feud. Dream went to slide between Tommy's legs, and he caught his leg, and I mean broke his knee and like snapped his leg in like 3 places. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible injury, and that's what sidelined his career for nearly a decade. But one of those deals, in wrestling, they didn't have contracts back then, so if he didn't work, he didn't get paid. So they put him in a wheelchair, and he managed the interns. He was Dr. Troy Graham, and he went around in a wheelchair and managed for several months against the Fabulous Ones. And man, he'd roll out there and cut promos, and I mean, they were amazing, man. You go back and watch some of that stuff from '85, and they did the deal where Stan and Steve were out of town, so they brought their dads in, and the interns beat up Stan and Steve's dad. And of course, Steve Keirn's dad's famously, war veteran, a 2-time prisoner of war, and a decorated colonel in the military. And Dream's out there, yeah, we beat your shell shock daddy so bad he thought he was back in Nam, Steve Keirn, and just saying all this cold shit, just like, Lord, Troy. And Lance, oh, come on, Dream. But man,
and that was perfect. If he wouldn't have been able to talk like that, yeah, you're right. He would have been out of work.
Oh yeah.
And because he had that rap that he had, kept him a paycheck coming while he was healing.
But people that didn't know better thought it was like one of those Ron Wright deals where everybody was just waiting for him to spring up out of that wheelchair and run in on the match, and like it wasn't happening because he was legit in that wheelchair, and a lot of people didn't understand that. But
I love
a couple
that
more
Ron
names,
Wright
and
gimmick.
oh yeah.
Miraculous recovery.
Ron Wright's another one. Ron Wright's another guy I want to talk about on here at length one day, but I guess it won't be tonight because he unfortunately didn't hold the Mid-America title. But before we move past Bill Dundee, that's got to be a guy you've come across, right? I mean,
oh yeah, I've wrestled Bill or Bill and Jamie numerous times. And always had a good interaction with Bill for the most part. He did go off on us one night, and then Jamie told him to cut us some slack and talked about the pay disparity between me and my partner and him. And Bill just stopped and he looked. He goes, "When you're right, you're right," and just like walked away. So Jamie was always good. If Bill got on, or he would stand up for the.
But listening to those two interact is always entertaining. Just hearing Bill and Jamie go at it like that. But yeah, Bill's a good guy. But every show I've ever been on with Bill, he would go to the dressing room door and look out at whoever's in the ring. Oh, they're killing the business out there. This is it. Tonight's the last night, guys. There's no more wrestling after this match. All right. So moving on. Right after, like I say, that took us through the end of 1983. And around that time, Jerry Jarrett seemed to start playing a little fast and loose with the Mid-America title. It gets a little hard to track at times. Jerry Lawler won it from Randy Savage, and since he was the current Southern Heavyweight Champion, the title was vacated from April 1984 to November 1984. And then in November of 84, Kortsia Korchenko, of course, everybody knows what a legendary worker that guy was, defeated Jacques Rougeau to become the champion. And then
so
Iron Mike Sharp.
Jacques is the champ? or
Yeah, it's one of those
tournament?
deals
Okay.
where me and a couple of my buddies had this theory when we were covering like some of 84 and 85 stuff. It seemed like Jerry would just put the Mid America title in a drawer somewhere because, like, all right, we got too many belts around here. Let's put this up for a while. And they'd tuck it in a drawer for a little bit, have Lawler win it, and he'd unify it with the Southern title. And then we'd go away for a little while. And then all of a sudden it would just turn up in a match. And I don't have the context of this. I don't know. A lot of times, like, and this is jumping way ahead, but I know like in 87, Moondog Spot rolls in one week and he's the Mid America champion, and we just act like he's been Mid America champion somewhere else and he's coming to town. So I don't know if maybe Jacques came in as Mid America champion and Korchenko won the belt from him. But Korchenko beat Jacques Rougeau, and then he had the belt for a little bit. And then the belt just disappears again. Like Korchenko leaves the territory and the belt just disappears with him. And the next time we see it, Iron Mike Sharp has the title from December 84 to February 85. And that's a pretty entertaining run. We've watched some of that, like I say, while we've been covering 85. Of course, he was feuding with Handsome Jimmy Valiant. And eventually he dropped the title to Handsome Jimmy. And then shortly after Handsome Jimmy won the title, he decided to leave Memphis to go back to Jim Crockett Promotions, and the title went vacant and dormant again until July of 85, when the belt was just arbitrarily awarded to Man Mountain Link. Then on July 15th, 85, Jerry Lawler defeated Man Mountain Link for the belt and vacated the title once again because he was Southern Heavyweight Champion. And so then the belt was vacant again for a few weeks. And then Coco Beware defeated Boda the Witch Doctor in the finals of a 14-man tournament to become the new champion. Got any fun stories about Boda the Witch Doctor? Have you?
No,
I guess you've come
no
across him in your
stories
travels.
about Boda the Witch Doctor or what was it? Pachinko?
Korchenko.
Yeah,
He
nothing
was
there either.
yeah, not one of the better Russians from out throughout history. I don't know
Oh,
if
that
you
was a
know.
Russian name?
Oh yeah,
No
he was. So this was he come around the time that the Koloffs and Nikolai Volkov and these guys were getting pushed, and Bill Watts brought him in, and there's the notorious story where Bill Watts beat him so bad in a match that he just rolled out of the ring, went in the dressing room, got his gear, got in his car, and just disappeared from wrestling for pretty much for good. I think he turned back up after he walked out of UWF. I think maybe he turned up in like Central States or, like Kansas City for like a brief little run. And then he was pretty much out of the business at that point. So, and most people thought that was one of the bright spots of Bill Watts' career was
getting rid of him.
Korchenko, but we'll leave that to other podcasts and bury that poor guy. But anyway, so here we go. We talked about the fact that he held it earlier, and we hadn't gotten to this point in 1985 yet on the Memphis podcast that I do with Ray Russell. But this one's going to have to shock you like it shocked me. Coco Beware would lose the Mid-America title in October of 1985 to Harley Race. Harley held it again in 85. And then he would only hold the belt for a month when he would lose it to Tom Branch in Kansas City, of course. But I had no idea that Harley held the belt for a month in 85 and won it from Coco. So I'm looking forward to when we get to that in Memphis here in a few months on the podcast. That should be interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up because he had already won the world title by 85.
Oh, yeah.
A few times, if I remember. I think. I'm trying to remember when his first reign was. This
would have been just before, not long at all before he went to the WWF.
Okay.
This would have been that little interim where he was just kind of wrestling around Kansas City and doing shots here and there for different people. And then I want to say, I know he was there in 86, but I want to say probably like December of 85 is when he goes to work for Vince. And that's probably when he passes this belt from Coco to Tom Branch. Tom Branch, we know who that is, right? It's That's the son of Tom Renesto, the famous booker.
Oh, is it? Okay. I do know Tom Jr. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know he worked as Tom Branch. Right on.
Yeah.
I
I just
actually
learned that
know
in
him
recent times.
personally.
So yes, that is Tom Ernesto Jr.
Okay, right
defeating
on.
Harley Race for the Mid America title. And so in this stretch of champions, we would see Buddy Landell.
Yeah.
Roger
baby.
Smith holds the title once again, except this time he's doing it under his Dirty Rhodes persona. Dutch Mantell would hold the Mid America title once again. And according to this, 14 different times for Dutch. Hustler Rip Rogers would be Mid America champion.
The foul mouth ripper.
That's right. Boy Tony Falk during his Boy Tony stage would be Mid America champ.
Just got a picture with him a couple of weeks ago with the belt.
He was in Jackson for that, and I kept seeing him across the room, and I never could get over there to him to get a picture, and it irks me to this day that I didn't manage to track him. I got a lot of great pictures that day, and Tony was on the list of people I wanted to get a picture with, and I didn't, but we'll rectify that one of these days. Big Bubba, a.k.a. Fred Ottman, held the Mid-America title during this time period. The Great Kabuki was the champ, and of course, Tracy Smothers would have 3 different reigns with the Mid-America title during this stretch. And at this point, Kabuki held the title. And when he left the territory in December of 86, the title would once again go inactive and would remain inactive until May of 87, when, as I mentioned before, Moondog Spot returned to Memphis as champion. But before we get to that, let's back up. Let's talk about some of those names we just mentioned. And some of them are guys that's already held the title. We've talked about Buddy Landell, Dirty Rhodes, of course, Dutch Mantell. But let's touch on Rip Rogers.
Obviously, huge fan of Rip from afar. I've only met him one time when I was doing some work with OVW. Did not disappoint. Exactly what you expected Rip to be. God, Rip was, I mean, him and Tom Pritchard have to be the 2 best trainers out there, right? I mean, who has produced more people than those 2, more stars?
The only person in their league, I'd say maybe Danny Davis. Which, I mean, he's on par with Rip. They're kind of hand in hand on a lot of the people that they trained jointly. So I think they kind of share the training on a lot of guys. But yeah, I mean, they're 2 of the best without question.
And yeah, this Rip, going from what he went from, like literally working for an outlaw territory, just doing everything he could. He says himself he didn't have a whole lot of training before he started. He learned a lot on the job,
right?
To do everything. I mean, he's worked for everywhere and everybody, and he's worked at all different parts of the card, from opening match, don't get over, okay, I won't get over, to being the main top guy. I don't know if there's anybody who's more adept, can work with more different people than Rip Rogers. He's the true, I think he's a true journeyman. Yeah. The fact that he has been everywhere, not so much in the underneath talent term of journeyman, even though he's did that too. I mean, how much money did he make in WCW? Carrying some of those guys to matches, you know what I mean?
Right.
And just, I think if he could still work in the ring, he still would. I think Rip loves wrestling that much.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. So you mentioned that you got a picture with the belt with this guy recently. And I know, being from where you're from, where your career has centered all these years, you got to have some experiences with Tony Falk.
Yes, Tony Falk was responsible for a lot of firsts for me. My first booking in Nashville was working for Tony Falk. First time ever working at the fairgrounds, which was honestly when I first started, that was my only goal, was to work at the fairgrounds, because that's where I watched wrestling, and I wanted to work in the venue where I watched wrestling. Was working for Tony Falk. First person to ever put a tag team title and then later a heavyweight title on me. First person to put me in main events. I had a lot of firsts working for Tony Falk in the most dilapidated crack house hotel in Nashville, which is now a 5-star hotel. They've gutted it and redone it, and it blows my mind.
Wow.
The Stadium Inn is now.
I was just about to say it. The Stadium Inn. Every time I would ever pass through Nashville, I'd see that over there. I'd be like, A lot of great wrestling happened in that place over there.
It's astounding because during the TNA times, everybody came through because it was an extra night of work. So, it'd be a Friday night, and there's for the people who don't know, there's literally in the Stadium Inn, there is a sign up front that says prostitutes, drug dealers, take your business elsewhere. You're not welcome here. And none of them paid any attention to it because the prostitutes and drug dealers were all there, as well as professional wrestlers. They still had, I know in 2009, still had a working cigarette vending machine.
In 2009, that's amazing.
Yes, and they stocked it. I saw the manager with cartons of cigarettes stocking it. That place was both disgusting and a place that'll always have stories to tell about. But we'd have Eric Young came through there, Andy Douglas came through. Dusty Rhodes made a drunken run in there.
That's amazing.
He was hanging out and he was drinking and talking to some of the TNA guys who were there. And then I guess the story I've always been told is Chase Stevens was in the ring and Dusty just hits the ring and starts giving out bionic elbows.
Which had to make Chase Stevens' life, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, he goes. I turned around, I saw Dusty, and the elbow went up, and I knew what to do. The elbow goes up, I go down.
It's amazing. I've never heard that. That is incredible.
So I mean, Tony, the things Tony had go on in that building is astounding. But Tony gave a lot of guys opportunities or early chances that I don't think Tony gets a lot of his just due. Period. For as good of a worker as he was, for as much as he put up with, he was a hell of a referee. I mean, Steve Austin talks about, Tony's calling half the match in his first match.
Yeah.
Tony trained a lot of guys. I mean, you see those advertisements for the USWA wrestling school.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think was in the ring doing the work? It wasn't Jerry Jarrett.
Exactly.
It was Tony, man.
I mean, Tony's one of those guys that was like a good role model because he was one of those guys. When you hear him say, well, just do whatever's asked of you. I mean, Tony was that guy, right? I mean, Tony did everything for Jerry Jarrett and that promotion. He played every role there was to play there, and he did it, to the best of his ability. But that's why he had a job there from when he first showed up until they shut the doors. Basically, because of that loyalty and the fact that they knew they could depend on him for whatever it was, to get in there and have a match with Jerry Lawler, or to ref a match, or to get the ring to the next town and set it up. Like, man, brother could do it all. So, no, you're right, man. He definitely does not get the credit he deserves, and I hope he does in due time. There's a lot of unsung heroes in wrestling, and a guy that I don't think probably got all the due he deserved. I know you agree with this. Like we said, he's a 3-time Mid-America champion. I know he's near and dear to your heart, Mr. Tracy Smothers.
100%, man. I wish Tracy was still around to this day. Tracy was one of the few people in wrestling who I think really cared about everybody who crossed his path, because Tracy had so many concussions, he couldn't remember what he did yesterday.
Yeah.
But he would remember something you told him last time you saw him, and he'd asked about it. Tracy 100% like legitimately cared. Tracy was Tracy was the epitome of leave it better than you found it, because I think any locker room Tracy was ever in, he left it better. Tracy's who I try to role model myself after, I guess. I try, because Tracy was always such a positive influence to the young guys, especially always stood up for the young guys. Always, man. Even if they weren't 100% in the right. Tracy would be like, come on, man. He's just a kid. He's learning, and he'd smarten them up. Had a temper on him, though. Tracy could go from 0 to 100. And as tough as they come, for God's sake, he's beat a bear. We all saw it.
Absolutely. I didn't get to be around Tracy a lot, but the times that I did, it was, I've told this story on these podcasts a million times. I'll tell it a million more, but like one of my favorite nights in the business ever, I was doing commentary for a deathmatch show in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And the guy I got to do commentary with for the entire show was Tracy. And so, those death matches are, man, it takes 20 minutes to set it up, 15 minutes to have the match, and then another 20 minutes, 30 minutes to clean it up and set up the next one. So in between matches, I was able to just pick Tracy's brain and ask him questions and had him tell me stories from like his whole career. And man, that's one of my favorite memories ever, man, because he was just, we had nothing else to do. So we just sitting there and I just, hey, Tracy, tell me about so-and-so. Oh yeah, brother. And he would tell me all about it. And just, man, such a good guy. And the last time I ever saw him in person was at a GCW show in Nashville.
Oh yeah,
he's walking around. He's walking around out there on a cane, man. I seen him before. I was like, "Geez, Tracy's on a cane." And
was it an actual cane?
Well, no, it was a stick.
Yeah, okay. I was about to say he had a cane, but he never used it. He had just had a log.
Yeah, that log, and he walked out there with it. And of course, people had seen him, coming in and through the building, and he sat out there. At intermission, he met people and it was really super cool. And he comes out there on that with that stick, and I look at my wife, and I'm like, now Tracy usually works heel at this show, but we're in Nashville, and people just talk to him intermission, and he's coming out here on a stick, and a lot of people know about his health troubles. Like, how's he going to be heel? He gets in our ring, throws that stick down, and starts cutting a promo. And dude, within 2 minutes, he's got everybody in there booing and cussing him. And just, I mean, it's such a great final memory of getting to see Tracy in the ring, because it represented everything that I knew and loved about that guy. Because he went out there, he turned that whole building against him. They all wanted to kill him before he got in the ring. And you tell he loved every minute of it. He had like a match with, oh my gosh, I can't think of the guy's name. He's the guy that comes out the teenage dirtbag, even though he's like 40 something. Nate Webb.
Yeah.
Nate Webb. Nate Webb.
Which him and Spider go back a long way to IWA anyway, so.
And because I talked to him before that, it's like, what you doing tonight, Trace? Oh, it's gonna be easy, baby. I'm working with Spider. I'm working with Spider, man. Oh man, ain't nothing. We're gonna have him before it even starts. And sure enough, they did. It was great. But I've always said, man, if I could just take an endless road trip with two guys and listen to them tell stories, it would be Tracy and Dutch Mantell. I could listen to those guys all day long, and I don't even care if the stories are true, and who knows if half of them are, but they're so entertaining, and and you can tell they mean it. And yeah, just such good guys, and former Mid-America champions, so we're able to talk about them here.
And Dutch's motto was always, "Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story." And he'll tell you that. Tracy, and I've been able to ride with both of them. Tracy would. He had some of the weirdest like road ribs, and one of them was always you pass a field full of cows, he just go, hey, there's your family. I don't know. It was just so funny, and like especially if it's like a long monotonous trip, and it's just like, oh geez, when are we going to get there? And then he'd just bust that out. Or if you pass like a big house, he'd be like, hey, you see that big house over there? They don't care if we draw tonight. They don't care. They don't care if we got enough gas money to make it home. All they care about is if they're going to have cheese and crackers, peanut butter crackers in their lunch tomorrow. That's all they care about. They don't care. Oh God!
There's your friends. I've heard several people. I've heard Wolfie and several people tell that like he's done that forever. Like there's your family, and he never passed cows with anybody that he didn't do that. There's your family.
I busted it out on like when I have some green guys ride with me for like their first road trips, and I'll hit, hey, there's your family. They go, what? I go, never mind.
Get a little test of who they know and what they know. My favorite thing about him is like the times I'd be around him, or even like you'd hear him in like interviews sometimes, but like I'd be in the dressing room at the shows and he'd be over there and somebody mentioned somebody, oh man. And he'd cuss them and then say a bunch of stuff they'd done, but he'd always finish with, but he's a good guy, man. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. No matter how bad he murdered his whole family. He's a sorry bank robbing, low down, but he's a good guy. You know what I mean? He's a good guy.
Always positive, man, or as positive as he could be. Except Jack and Coke Mondays. Those can get rough sometimes.
All right. Well, before we get too far off the rails here, we'll finish out the history. So Jeff Jarrett would swap the Mid-America title back and forth with Moondog Spot in '87. And throughout that, Carl Fergie held the title. Jesse Barr would hold it again, except this time as Jimmy Jack Funk, the lost Funk brother or cousin or whatever relative he was supposed to be of the Funk family. And Jeff would end up being a 5-time Mid-America champion before the title was unified with the other championships of the CWA, as Jerry Lawler became the first-time CWA heavyweight champion, unifying the Southern title, the Mid-America title, the International title, all into one belt on December 7th, 1987. And at that point, the Mid-America title ceased to be for many years. Now, it depends on who you ask on how many years. We talked about this. I asked you, kind of where does the NWA stand on this? And I know they kind of don't pick it up until you, which we'll get to here in a moment. But now I know that the Mid-America title got revived there around Nashville for a little while, and you know something about that, and you are close to some of the guys who held that title. So tell us that's a part of the history that I really couldn't find much about. So tell us a little bit about the Mid-America Championship revival here. What was that, around 2002?
So I don't know when Mike Porter began running under the NWA banner, but Mike Porter around 2002 for sure, because I was watching the TV. But I don't know if he had done it before then or not. I don't quite know the history as well. But Mike Porter ran an NWA promotion. I guess it would have been prior to the Tharp era. So I guess that would have been, was that Fred Rubenstein and all them?
Yes.
And like Barons and stuff like that.
Right.
But he had a territory in his NWA main event, and it is different towns in Middle Tennessee, Murfreesboro, being where I was born. They did their TV out of there at the Inferno Bar on Main Street, Sundays at like 1 p.m. Because if you go back and watch some of those old TVs, you'll see me and my best friend in the crowd a lot.
Nice.
Because we just discovered independent wrestling. We didn't know it was a thing. It was like,
right.
We knew WCW, WWE, ECW, and then we had obviously USWA. And like, that's all we knew existed. And then we'd started seeing like USA Championship Wrestling and Mike Porter's show coming on. And we're like, what's this?
Right.
But so when we initially got trained, we were trained by Mike Woods, Buzz Dupp, and the Outlaw Lee Condrey. All three of them at different points were the Mike Porter version of the NWA Mid-America Heavyweight Championship. They didn't have this belt, teeny. They had gone a different look, and it was rough. It was rough. I've never held the actual belt. I'd only seen it. From what I've been told, the plates weren't even metal; they were polyurethane.
Oh wow!
And like had like it was printed on top of it, and it was just like you can find a picture online, but they're few and far between. But if I remember right, it was just like, when I say the United States, it was just like the outline of the country, like no filled in, no state divide, just a blank outline of the country, and said like NWA up top real small, like Mid-America Champ, and that was it.
And I have seen a picture of that at one point.
Yeah, yes, it's silver. It looks terrible.
Yes, it looked like somebody made it for like their backyard promotion type.
Yes. Oh, 100%. To the point that I can't remember who. Might have been Mikey. But when Mikey won the belt, and I may be misspeaking, but I know when one of them won the belt, they're like, listen, this was like crap. I have a replica belt we can do until we get something else. And like that, it was an IC replica belt for a while with like with letters on it to say Mid-America, because it was so rough. They eventually, I believe, got a belt made. I don't remember what it looked like, because I know by the time I started working for Main Event was when Barons was coming up, and they were really focusing on the Mid-America TV Championship. So I know that there's the Mid-America title going around at one time. Well, Will Owens held it for a while. And he dropped it to Chad Hyatt because Will blew out his knee. either giving or taking an atomic drop, which is either way funny.
It's such a Willow and things to happen.
Yeah, of all things, an atomic drop.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I don't even remember even looking at it. It was at that point, it was just like Barron's focused on TV belt. We were just kind of doing, it was me and Flint, and we were just kind of doing tag stuff. So it didn't matter. They didn't have any tag team belts, so we were even chasing that. We were just kind of doing our thing. And I can't remember. I guess it would have been around the time that it had to be. It was around the time that Tharp bought the NWA. That Porter pulled out. And I'm guessing at that time the NWA Mid America title once again ceased to be. I may be wrong. One of the other promotions may have picked it up.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, that I don't think it was done after that.
So officially, as far as the current NWA is concerned, the title ceased to be on December 7th, 1987. And on January 6th, 2024, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremiah Plunkett became the first NWA Mid-America champion of record since 1987. There you see him right there. That's how they announced it on the website. Tell us how it felt, man, to be the one, because who knows, you may hold that title forever, but whoever holds that title in the future, there's only one guy that can say he won it when it came back. He was the first champion since 1987. So Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett held the title. Tell us how it felt, man. Tell us about that night.
One small correction. It was June 6th.
June 6th.
Yeah. And didn't officially go out because of TV taping schedules till early September.
My bad. I was typing these notes, and I think I inverted the numbers there. I put 1-6 instead of 6-10, but I knew you. That's why I said correct me if I'm wrong, because I was like, I'm liable to mistype that. So,
but no, it was insane, man. And so it'd been one of those things. I had been off TV and just kind of working indies and working the NWA territory shows for about a year. Right. So I didn't know if they'd ever have me back on TV. And then I got a call to do Knoxville. I go, okay, cool. And then it got announced that I was in that match. And I'm like, it's not going to go to me. And to the point to where by the time not until they came out of a production meeting and someone goes, hey, champ, was I like, oh, this is legit. Because of the history, because I grew up with this belt, I grew up, I did some training under Dutch Mantell. Tracy Smothers was one of my mentors. I got to ride around with Bobby Eaton a lot. My initial trainers were all Mid-America champions. Like, I have so many links to the NWA Mid-America Heavyweight Championship that the fact that they brought that back and I'm the one that's bringing it back. I don't know, man. It's surreal. My name's forever on a list that, as we've talked about, that includes Harley Race and Buddy Rogers and Buddy Landell and just everybody. The only thing that's on my mind now is, I can't let this be for nothing. So I've always, and as long as you've known me, I've always been like, rubber to the road, let's make these towns, right? I mean, yeah. I've stayed as busy as just about anyone. As I've gotten older, I've slowed down. But still, I say that, and I think I'm on par to have almost 100 matches this year. So I say I've slowed down. I topped out. The most I've ever done is 150 matches in 1 year. And I'm par to hit around 100 this year. And I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to defend this belt any and everywhere I can, any and everywhere that the NWA proves me to have a title defense. I'm going to do it because I want this belt to be a belt that people go, the NWA is defending that everywhere. I want I just don't want them to bring this back and then like no one think about it. I want everybody to think about it, and I want everybody to know that I'm the person with the belt around my waist.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I don't know why. Like I said, I mistyped that because I knew around the time you won it because you had actually messaged me. We talked about something. You were looking for a photo with the title that I struggled to try to find and did not find one. What you talked about earlier, that background, that set background, and you had told me like, hey, this hadn't aired yet, so keep this under your hat. But
oh yeah, because I was going to do the picture like I was on the old set.
Yeah, and I tried and reached out to several people that I thought might could help us, and I never could find one, and I hated it. But man, when you sent me that, I was like, oh my god, that's perfect. Like there's literally no one I could think of better than Jeremiah Plunkett to be the Mid America champion, and especially the first one out of the gate when it comes back. So congratulations, man. Like it's super cool. And one of the guys that we mentioned is a former Mid America champion, a guy that you said you spent some time with, Bobby Eaton. Bobby Eaton's one of those guys who's really talented in the ring that I defy you to find anybody that has anything bad to say about Bobby Eaton. You can't find them. They don't exist. And you are one of those guys as well. Like there's nobody out there that's got any bad stories about Jeremiah Plunkett. Everybody likes you, everybody respects you, and you've earned that. And I have nothing but faith in you that you're gonna do this title proud. And man, when you think of the NWA and what it stands for, to me, you're the kind of guy that's just the epitome of that. So congratulations, and just keep doing what you're doing, man. And that title will mean as much or more than it ever has. I have complete faith in that for sure.
I appreciate the kind words, man. I'm just going to stay busy. And like I said, keep the rubber to the road. Now the real work starts.
That's right.
It's one thing to win it. It's another thing to keep it.
Absolutely. Well, there's going to be a lot of people gunning for you. And I don't know, maybe we didn't do you any favors shining such a light on the history of it. There's going to be people who may watch and listen to this and go like, geez, Harley Race and Buddy Rogers had that title. I need to get after that, man. So you may have some challengers come out of the woodwork who now that belt means even more to them than before. But that's why I wanted to do this, because I don't think I think of that belt, like I said, 87. That's bore a lot of young people's time, even guys who are somewhat veterans of the business now. It's before they started following it. And so I really wanted to just take some time and shine a light on the history and kind of let people know, the legacy of that title and who's held it and what it means. And I thought, well, who better to have on here to do it with me than the man who holds it right at this very moment. So again, I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you taking this time to do this. I really do. And it's been exactly as great as I hoped it would be. And man, we'll hook up again here down the road and check back in with you and see how things are going. And hey, also I just want to point out while we're here, I'll put a link in the description, man. I've been reading your columns that you're putting up, and man, great stuff there. People need to tell people where they can find those and how they can follow you there, and that's a good way to keep up with what you're doing, because you're kind of telling about, like you say, your journal of being a journeyman.
Yeah, yes, thanks. So over on Slam Wrestling, slamwrestling.com. I've struck up over the past couple of years a kind of friendship with one of their writers, Tommy Milagro. We've done a couple of interviews together, and I wrote a guest column when Francisco Chiazzo passed away. And he had said something. He goes, "Hey, I really enjoyed your piece. Would you ever want to write something for us?" And I'm like, I don't know. And a little bit of background: I was an English major in college. Now that would have got me absolutely nothing in the real world unless I was going to be an English teacher, which was my goal, because I would have had summers off. Only reason. I didn't want to teach kids. I just wanted summers off. But and I just kind of put it off like I normally did. And then we had done another interview post the announcement of the title win. And he goes, "Hey, are you writing this stuff down?" And one of my biggest regrets was early on in wrestling. I was writing down my matches, writing down, where it was, all the stuff that if you listen to Cornette and Jericho, they tell you to do. Well, I hadn't listened to them yet. And I had some guy who, looking back, to me, he was a vet because he was a wrestler and I was like 2 months in. But in all actuality, hadn't been 40 miles outside his hometown, told me that I was a mark for doing it. And God, the last thing you want to be your first 2 months in wrestling is a mark, right?
Yeah.
So I threw away the notebook and never did it again.
Oh my gosh.
And then about 5 years later, I was reading Jericho's book and read that he had done it. And I'm like, well, I'll start. Maybe I can go back and remember. I can't remember them. I don't know.
No.
Where all these little towns I was in. I don't remember the dates. I don't remember all that stuff. And it kind of became a thing to where it's like, well, if I start now, there's so much missing. And so I just never got around to do it. I'd always talk myself out of it, right? It's too daunting of a task to try to find stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But then when he said that, and I kind of explained that story to him, and he's like, well, start now. He goes, if nothing else, you can chronicle what you're doing with the belt. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, I'll think about it. Well, he apparently wanted to push me a little harder. So he got the editor, Greg Oliver, involved and sent an email and made the introduction. And it kind of it all came quick, man. And literally the first one that came out, I just did my second one. It's going to be a weekly column released on Tuesdays. And yeah, the first one was literally done within 2 days because they're like, we can start this now. And I'm like, I need to get to writing. But yeah, that's, man, what I'm doing. I'm just kind of chronicling my journeys. It's called Journeyman Journals. But I guess technically the title is Jeremiah Plunkett's Journeyman Journals, but I thought it was weird to have my name involved in it. It's
I get it. Yeah.
Journeyman Journal sounds better to me. But yeah, it's over on slamwrestling.com and it drops every Tuesday. And I'm going to keep it up as much as I can. Now on these, when I have the rare off weekends, especially with holidays coming up, we'll see what I write about. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Well, man, I'm glad they talked you into it because it's a great read, and I highly suggest it to everybody to go follow it, read the first couple, and keep track of them because it's a cool journal of what Jeremiah's doing, and it's going to be fun to watch you in this title reign and see where it takes you. It's already taken you some fun places so far, and you're just getting started, man. So. Again, thank you for coming on, man. Like I say, I have nothing but the utmost respect for you, and I couldn't be happier for your success, and I hope it continues. I know it will, and I'll be reading your journals and keeping up with you, and we'll talk again soon, man. So enjoy those holidays that are coming up because they'll be here and gone before you know it. If it's like everything else, man. I was always told when I was a kid, like, oh, time goes so fast once you get older. I'm like, oh, bull, it takes forever for Christmas to get here when I was a little kid. And now, man, I look up and it's freaking October. I'm like, what? Yep. There's no way. And, man, it doesn't stop. So, yeah, I'm glad you're documenting that stuff. It's a way of kind of making things slow down, processing it because, gosh, I mean, I'm sure right now, the career you've had, like you said, you try to think back on that stuff and it's all just kind of a blur and you haven't stopped. So, you really don't really take the time to really process a lot of this stuff and really enjoy the moments. It kind of comes and goes and you just keep moving. So I feel like writing these articles will kind of help you, maybe stop and think through it a little bit and maybe process some of this stuff and maybe enjoy it a little more and maybe see it more for what it is. I don't know. It can't hurt anyway, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that is what it's making me do. My mom would always talk about, you've been so many places. What do you remember about them? I go, the arena and the road getting in there. So I do think this is making me actually have to take stuff in and living in the present as opposed to, okay, as soon as I get this done, I got to head back and,
Yeah, exactly. Because you got to be like, hey man, I got to remember some of this stuff because I got to write about it. So
Yeah.
it kind of gives you a little bit of an assignment. So nothing wrong with that. Well, all right, folks, thank you for checking out the show, and make sure you check out NWA Wrestling. Go to the website, take a look around, check out Jeremiah's weekly article over at Slam Wrestling, and keep up with everything he's got going on. Jeremiah, thanks, brother. Continued success.
Appreciate you having me, man. Thank you so much.